Welcome to Community Issues here on WJCH. I'm your host, Mark Bartlebaugh, and I'm joined today by two guests, Phil and Kathy Nordquist. They are parents of a child with cystic fibrosis, and they're also involved with the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation Greater Illinois chapter. Phil and Kathy, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us, Mark.
Really glad to have you, and we want to take this next half hour or so and learn a little bit more about cystic fibrosis in general and hear from you in terms of your story with raising a child who has cystic fibrosis. But let's start very generally just talking about what cystic fibrosis is. I'm sure many in the listening audience have heard of it, but might not have a good understanding of what exactly it is and how this affects a person, how it affects the body. Tell us about that.
Sure. Well, cystic fibrosis is it's a life-threatening disease that mostly affects the lungs and the digestive system. It causes the body to have a thick, sticky mucus, which clogs the lungs, and it leads to life-threatening lung infections. It also obstructs the pancreas, which stops natural enzymes from helping the body break down and absorb food. So that's a basic description of it.
Sure, and I think one of the reasons that some might not be as familiar with this as they are with other medical conditions is because it doesn't affect a lot of people in the United States. When I say a lot, I mean not as many as different types of cancer, for example, but it does affect a fair number. Talk about how many people are affected by cystic fibrosis nationwide and here in our area in Chicago.
Well, there's about 30,000 children and adults in the United States that have cystic fibrosis and about 70,000 worldwide. And then in addition to that, there's about 10 million more, or about 1 in every 31 Americans who are carriers of the defective CF gene, but they do not have the disease.
Okay, and does cystic fibrosis fall along certain demographic lines? Does it affect certain groups more than others, or is it pretty evenly distributed in terms of demographics?
You know, CF is most common in Caucasians, but it can affect all races.
All right, so that's some background on what cystic fibrosis is and who it affects. You mentioned that there are 30,000 cases of cystic fibrosis in the U.S., and there are also about 1,000 new cases diagnosed every year. Are numbers like this increasing or decreasing in recent years, or are they remaining fairly steady?
I think the number has been pretty steady. Now that the newborn screening is required by all 50 states, I think that most of those cases are being diagnosed earlier.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about that. The newborn screening now required in all 50 states, as you mentioned. Talk about this screening and the process through which cystic fibrosis is typically diagnosed.
So with the newborn screen, what they do is they're looking for a genetic marker in there, and if they have that, they require the child to go through further testing to determine whether or not they actually have cystic fibrosis. So most people who, even if they receive a positive on the newborn screening, most of the cases do not have cystic fibrosis. But for those ones that do, it's a great tool to get them diagnosed early. Another diagnostic test that they do is the sweat test. And what they do is they collect sweat and they look at the amount of chloride that is found. And a high level of chloride means that a person has cystic fibrosis. And the sweat test has kind of been the gold standard as far as in diagnosing cystic fibrosis. It's been very accurate. Another way that they can test for cystic fibrosis is doing a genetic test, where they would then look and they actually look to see if the person carries two defective cystic fibrosis genes.
Yeah. So we've been talking fairly technical here about diagnosis and what exactly cystic fibrosis is. Let's shift a little bit more toward the practical side and talk about how this affects individuals who have cystic fibrosis. You have a child who has this. Let's first talk about life expectancy, and then we'll talk about the daily routine and activities of life. Thankfully now life expectancy is much longer than it was if we would have been having this conversation, 15, 20 years ago. Talk a little bit about the changes in that area and what the life expectancy is now.
Well, Mark, there's really not a real accurate way to predict how long a person with cystic fibrosis will live because there's so many different factors that include the person's health, just how severe their disease is, the time they were diagnosed. There's many different factors that can change for what the diagnosis is. In addition, some adults with cystic fibrosis only recently began to use these new treatments that have come out, while an infant that's been diagnosed at birth will have an advantage of starting stuff right off the bat and things that weren't available today that has changed how things are. The actual number now is about 37 is the medium age of survival, but it's really hard to even say that because so much has been done over the last 10, 15 years of treatments that number is really even hard to come by. So we're thankful for the progress that has been done with the technology and the medicines.
Absolutely, and you have people living on both sides of that too. People even beyond 37 into their 40s or 50s. Let's talk about how this affects the daily routine and activities of life for, in your case anyway, children who have cystic fibrosis and their caregivers. Talk a little bit about how this has affected you and your lifestyle living with a child who has cystic fibrosis.
Yeah. For the most part, people with cystic fibrosis can do normal life activities when they're feeling well. They can go to school, they can have jobs, they can play sports. But every day, they also need to follow a pretty rigorous routine of treatments and medications to maintain their health. So, for example, our daughter, Leah, she takes 6 different medicines throughout the day at different times during the day. She has inhaled medicines and nebulized treatments that she does. She also has to do a vest treatment twice a day. So she wears this vest that inflates, and then it shakes her for 20 minutes each session. And this is done so it can break up any of the sticky mucus in her lungs to try to help keep her lungs nice and clear. She also needs to take dietary supplements and requires enzymes every time she eats. And these are the treatments she does just every day just to maintain her health. When she does have an exacerbation of her disease or a flare-up, then the doctor adds aggressive antibiotic treatments into our routine as well.
And we might have to do another vest treatment as well on top of that. So it makes for a very long day because we have to start really early in the morning, and sometimes it goes right to when she goes to bed.
I don't know if your daughter is in school. Maybe talk a little bit about that. If your daughter's in school, how you've worked with the schools to handle the treatment regimen that she has to have on a daily basis, or if not your daughter, then how this is generally handled by the schools.
Yes, our daughter goes to the public school, the elementary school right down the street from our house. Yeah. And we've worked really closely with the school to make school and her classroom a safe environment for her. And they've done a lot just working alongside of us to try to create that environment.
Yeah, and that's what I was getting at is when you have, that kind of treatment regimen, how are the schools involved in this, and are they up to speed on this, so to speak?
Well, we had to have a session in the beginning of the school year to sit down with the nurse, with the teacher aide, to really talk through what the disease is and all the things that make school be a safe place for her. And then even talking through how she eats, and because a child with cystic fibrosis needs to eat a lot more calories than a typical child. And so one of the things the school even does is they monitor how much she eats, and they send home a note each day telling us how she's done and with her food and if there was coughs during the day. So they've been really helpful to be partners with us as we treat her.
Yeah. That's good to know that, again, as you said earlier, children with cystic fibrosis can, for the most part, live a normal life with the exception of this treatment regimen, and the schools are partnering with families and helping along in this journey. The treatment that you mentioned, the medications and so on, I'm sure is not cheap, even with insurance. Talk a little bit about some assistance that's available for families who have to do this kind of thing, for as long as the child is blessed to have life.
Right. And we know that we do have insurance coverage, which does help us quite a bit. And then on top of that, Leah has been part of some different patient assistance programs. And thankfully, there's some great patient assistance programs out there for children who have cystic fibrosis. And currently, she is part of one called the Department of Specialized Care for Children through UIC. And we can't even say enough how thankful we are to have that type of support and assistance to help us through this time.
Yeah. I know one of the things that the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation is involved in, sort of the core of their work, is supporting and raising support for these care centers, cystic fibrosis care centers. You mentioned University of Illinois. Talk a little bit more about the care centers that are available here in the Chicago area for individuals with cystic fibrosis.
Right. And, they take a team approach to do treatment through these CF care centers. And what's great is that the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, they have a process of accrediting these CF care centers. And so you can go right on their website and you can see a whole complete list of accredited CF care centers that are in your area. And we personally go to Advocate Children's Hospital in Oak Lawn. And that's the care center that we're a part of. And there's a fabulous team there that we work with. And, they have the CF doctor, a nurse, a dietitian, a respiratory therapist, a physical therapist, a social worker. There's just a great team. And so when we take Leah in for her every 3 months, we take her in for regular appointments with our CF Care Center team. And we get to meet with all these people, and so they work together so that we can really provide the best care we can for her.
Yeah. We're talking today with Phil and Kathy Nordquist. They are parents of a child with cystic fibrosis. They've been talking about their daughter Leah, who has cystic fibrosis, and they're also involved with the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation Greater Illinois chapter. Phil and Kathy, let's talk a little bit about research and cystic fibrosis research. Obviously, one of the main components of the mission of the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation is to find a cure, and currently there isn't a cure, but there is good treatment available, as we've mentioned. What is the current focus of research and the quest for a cure on cystic fibrosis?
Yeah. As parents of a child with cystic fibrosis, we are eagerly anticipating the results of some very exciting research being done right now. In 2012, the FDA approved a new drug called Kalydeco for people who have a specific mutation of CF, the G551D mutation. So only about 4% of the CF population has this mutation. But for that 4% of the population, this drug has had amazing results. It's the first drug to address the underlying cause of cystic fibrosis, and it is really opening up new doors to research and development that may lead to a cure for all people living with this disease. And right now, we're really excited about this because they're doing clinical trials that are testing using this Kalydeco in combination with another drug, VX-809, which, when you use them together, would benefit people with the most common CF mutation, which is the Delta F508. And our daughter Leah, she has 2 copies of this CF mutation, the Delta F508. And the results from these ongoing clinical trials have been showing some really promising results. And so we're very excited about that, and we're looking forward to hearing some really good news, and are very hopeful that these drugs will be working together to help.
It's really from a result of the funds that have been raised by the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation that these research companies, that they would be able to even work on this drug. And so it's a direct result of fundraising. So we're seeing results. So to fundraise, to say, hey, look where your money's coming and look what it's doing. So it's been great.
Yeah. You mentioned, that's a central part of what the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, the Greater Illinois chapter, and really the national foundation does is drug development and funding for drug development such as this. Let's kind of shift now and talk about the work of the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. You mentioned the clinical trials and the other things for this particular therapy, this drug that are underway. Are there any other major efforts right now that the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation is currently getting behind in terms of funding?
Well, that's kind of the one that we know most about. We don't really have other things that we've been seeing, but we know that they are definitely putting efforts to getting more tomorrows every day. So.
Yeah,
right. That's their taglines: adding tomorrows every day. And actually, they have. You can go on their website and you can see that they have this whole pipeline of different medications that they are involved with and supporting and researching and developing to really enhance the quality and length of life for somebody with cystic fibrosis. And already, some of the drugs that they have had a major part in pushing through the whole process to getting all the way through to approval by the FDA. Our daughter Leah is already on some of those drugs so we can see that the work that they have been doing is already benefiting our daughter.
Yeah. The Cystic Fibrosis Foundation also makes available various resources for families and individuals affected by cystic fibrosis. Talk a little bit more about that and perhaps about your own journey when you found out that your child had cystic fibrosis and you probably didn't know a lot about it. What were some of your first steps there in terms of getting resources and learning about all these things that we've been discussing today?
Yeah, it's really interesting because that first night when we found out about Leah's initial diagnosis, she was 2 years old when she was diagnosed. And so when we got that phone call from the doctor, and we did a quick phone call with our new CF doctor, and he answered a couple of our questions and said, "You're going to come in tomorrow and we're going to talk about this, and we're going to kind of start you on the whole journey of understanding what cystic fibrosis is." But what he did say is, tonight, what you can do is go to the website, the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. It's a great website. It's a place where you can get some good information, and that's a good place to start. So right away from the beginning, we were brought right into the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation to give us some information and to give some support as we even began our journey. I also feel like the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation helps us get connected with the local CF community. We've gotten to know some other families who have CF, and just being able to talk with them and work together, especially within doing these different fundraisers, because we all have a common goal. Our hope and our desire is to see a cure come about for cystic fibrosis. And I feel like the work that the CF Foundation is doing, it really gives us a hope for a better future, and it gives us a chance in a way that we can fight to find this cure and help in the search for the cure. And so they provide a lot of opportunities for you to get involved, and especially to help raise money that supports this vital CF research.
I remember asking our doctor, Dr. Achter, so tell us, how long is she going to live? That was one of our first questions.
Yeah.
And he said to us, I expect her to live a full life. And I think that's because of his confidence in seeing how far things have gone and come with research and development and with therapies that have helped CF patients. And so, while, we can't help but be anxious, but we do know there's hope. And so that's something we're very grateful for.
You talked about some of the fundraisers and special events that CFF, Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, is doing throughout the year. Talk about some of those and perhaps some ways that individuals can get involved in the cause of finding a cure for cystic fibrosis.
Well, Great Strides is the largest national fundraising event that the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation does. And it's a very easy way for people to get involved, and it's the way that Phil and I have decided that we really want to put a lot of our focus into. And so we formed a team, Leah's Frontline, and every year we invite our friends and family to come out and walk with us. It's a 3-mile walk. It's family friendly. And we ask people who come and join us as walkers to take that as an opportunity to help us raise awareness about cystic fibrosis and also to help us raise funds to support that research that is trying to help us find a cure. And so it's been a great experience for us to see people come out and rally around us, the community of people who love us and want to care for us and help us on this journey. And it's really humbling and amazing to be part of that. And all at the same time, we get to support the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation and the work that they're doing.
All right, so the Great Strides Walk, one of the larger events that the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation has each year. We should mention that is coming up this year on Saturday, May 11th. It'll be held at Pilcher Park in Joliet. This is the Joliet Bourbonnais Great Strides Walk for cystic fibrosis. We'll give the websites at the end of the program in a few minutes here for more information on that. But Phil and Kathy, in these remaining minutes, I want to make sure I ask you about volunteering. I'm sure that events like Great Strides don't come off easily without a lot of volunteer effort. Talk a little bit about opportunities to volunteer with the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation here in the Chicago area.
Yeah. And again, I think one of the easiest ways to volunteer is by helping with the fundraising. Often there's local fundraisers that you could even organize a local fundraiser in your neighborhood or workplace to help support that. You could participate in events. They do have, beyond Great Strides, there are a lot of just a variety of fundraising events throughout the year. Coming up this year, they have, they're part of the First Look for Charity, the Grand Chef's Gala, the Casino Chicago event. They also have some sporting type events where there's like a CF Cycle for Life event, an extreme hike event. So there's a lot of opportunities for people to just jump into an event that's already planned and be part of that. You could also look at serving on a committee or volunteering at one of these events.
All right, and we have a few minutes left here. I'll ask an open-ended question before we conclude. You've told us a lot about cystic fibrosis, about treatment, research, clinical trials, and the work of the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. Really have offered a lot of hope for individuals with this medical condition in terms of the recent advancements and ongoing research related to cystic fibrosis. Anything else that you would share just from your personal experience or related to the work of the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation as we wrap up here today? Anything that we've missed or anything you want to leave folks with as we conclude?
Well, I know that cystic fibrosis doesn't just affect the child. It doesn't just affect the family. It affects the people around us. And we've found that people at our church, people in our community have really supported us. And so we feel like we're not alone. So that's one thing that we really appreciate of being part of the family, basically, of people that are together, really trying to find a cure, praying for a cure, and that's where we find a lot of hope.
Yeah, that's good to hear. We are just about out of time on the program for today. It has gone quickly. Before we conclude, I should mention that another area in which the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation is involved is advocacy and public policy. They have several priorities for this, including advancing cystic fibrosis research and development, promoting access to care, and also raising cystic fibrosis awareness. Some of these things that we've talked about today. Phil and Kathy, you're not necessarily involved in the advocacy side of the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, but there is work going on there. What is the website for more information, not only on that, but for all of the things that we've talked about today related to cystic fibrosis and the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation? Give us a website address, a Facebook page, whatever you have for more resources on these issues.
The website is pretty easy. It's www.csf.org. And if you go there, you can find a link to the Greater Illinois chapter as well. But even just the general website has just so much information and can direct you in a lot of ways. If you look it up on Facebook, you'll find a Facebook page there as well. And it's easy if you're on their website, there's an opportunity to be added to their email list, and there's links right there as ways that you can just get involved in different events that they're doing.
We also have our own website for Leah called leahsfrontline.com, and if anyone wanted to see our story a little bit more, they could check it out there.
All right. What was that again? leahsfrontline.com?
Yep.
All right. Very good. So leahsfrontline.com, the website of the Nordquist family, Phil and Kathy and their daughter Leah, and cff.org, the website of the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. We've been talking today with Phil and Kathy Nordquist. They are very involved with the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, Greater Illinois chapter, and also the parents of Leah, a child with cystic fibrosis. Phil and Kathy, hey, thanks so much for filling us in on cystic fibrosis today and sharing a part of your story as well. Appreciate that.
Thanks a lot, Mark.
Thank you.
So glad to have you. This is WJCH, Joliet.